The sun beat down fiercely on the river, turning the water into a burning mirror. Clara gripped her paddle tightly, her muscles tense with effort. Since her early childhood in a modest village, she had learned to fight against obstacles, but nothing had prepared her for this trial. This competition was not a simple game, it was an opportunity to change her life. $1 million were promised to whoever could complete the course. 12 stages, each more difficult than the last, but Clara had no choice. Poverty had forged her courage, and her mind refused to retreat. On the horizon, a massive movement made the water tremble. The deep, resonant sound of a huge exhale echoed through the river. The hippopotamus, the river monster, a symbol of raw strength and unpredictability, appeared out of nowhere. Its shiny skin reflected the sun, and its piercing eyes fixed on Clara with a terrifying intelligence. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. She knew that a single mistake could be fatal. Every movement had to be precise. One wrong move and her canoe could capsize. Her hands slipped over the wet bamboo, each paddle stroke in the water becoming a challenge to maintain balance and move forward. The suspense was unbearable. The hippopotamus approached, growling, sending powerful waves. Clara felt her mind wavering between fear and determination. She thought of her village, her family, all the years of deprivation and broken dreams. Everything was at stake in these few meters of river. She took a deep breath, recalling every lesson she had learned. Stay calm in the face of danger. Observe your opponent before acting. Use the current to your advantage. And she paddled again, harder, faster, trying to distract the beast with precise movements, evading its charges. The tension was at its peak. Every second seemed to last an eternity. The canoe rocked dangerously, water splashing Clara's face, but she could not give up. The $1 million were not just money. They represented freedom, the opportunity to transform her life and that of her family. Each paddle stroke became an act of courage, a silent battle between her will and the enormous creature advancing, imposing, and indifferent to human effort. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. She knew that a single mistake could be fatal. Every movement had to be precise. One wrong move and her canoe could capsize. Her hands slipped over the wet bamboo, each paddle stroke in the water becoming a challenge to maintain balance and move forward. The suspense was unbearable. The hippopotamus approached, growling, sending powerful waves. Clara felt her mind wavering between fear and determination. She thought of her village, her family, all the years of deprivation and broken dreams. Everything was at stake in these few meters of river. She took a deep breath, recalling every lesson she had learned. Stay calm in the face of danger. Observe your opponent before acting. Use the current to your advantage. And she paddled again, harder, faster, trying to distract the beast with precise movements, evading its charges. The tension was at its peak. Every second seemed to last an eternity. The canoe rocked dangerously, water splashing Clara's face, but she could not give up. The $1 million were not just money. They represented freedom, the opportunity to transform her life and that of her family. Each paddle stroke became an act of courage, a silent battle between her will and the enormous creature advancing, imposing, and indifferent to human effort. Clara felt the raw power of the hippopotamus beneath the water, like a deep tremor resonating through her bones. Every wave thrown against her canoe threatened to tip it over. She breathed in short bursts, trying to calm her heart, which drummed in her chest like a war drum. Fear was present, but it was not just the fear of dying. It was the fear of losing her chance, of seeing all her dreams slip away. Suddenly, an unexpected movement almost made her fall into the water. The hippopotamus, with surprising speed, had turned its massive head, its piercing eyes fixed on Clara with a terrifying intelligence. Suddenly, a wave stronger than expected hit the canoe. Water crashed onto her face, nearly cutting off her breath. She felt herself slip, but with an inner strength she didn't know she possessed, Clara gripped the edge firmly and stabilized the canoe. At that moment, a strange feeling swept over her. Fear was still there, but it transformed into energy, into extreme focus that made her almost invincible. Clara thought of all the hardships in her life: cold nights without food, humiliations, skeptical looks from people who didn't believe in her. All of it seemed to converge in this precise moment, giving her a reason not to yield. She realized that survival was not only a physical matter, but a life lesson. One must accept fear, analyze it, and then transform it into action. The hippopotamus was still following her, growling, its movements terrifyingly powerful. Clara felt the animal's hot, humid breath brush against her hands and arms. Every movement had to be precise, every action calculated. She recalled the stories of survivors, men and women who faced nature and its dangers with patience and intelligence rather than brute force. She knew she had to adopt that approach. Then she spotted a narrow channel, barely visible among the tall aquat grass. It was an opportunity. If she managed to slip through, the hippopotamus couldn't easily follow. But the passage was risky. One wrong move and the canoe could capsize in the fast current. Clara took a deep breath and trusted her instinct. With absolute focus, she guided the canoe with precision. Every centimeter mattered. The bamboo creaked, the water struck violently, and the monster followed, but with less agility. Clara felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with relief. She had taken the advantage. In that intense moment, she understood something fundamental. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. And perseverance is not ignoring obstacles, but turning them into opportunities for learning. Every movement, every decision was a lesson in strategy, patience, and above all, self-mastery. As she continued, the sun began to descend, casting long, ominous shadows on the water. Clara knew the next stage would be even harder, but now she felt a new strength, born from the direct experience of danger. She had faced fear, tested her limits, and discovered resources within herself that she had not known. And you, viewer, what would you do in her place? Would you have the courage to continue despite fear, danger, and uncertainty? What do you take away from this struggle between the survival instinct and the desire for personal transformation? Clara continued paddling, each movement a step towards her goal, each breath a victory over fear. The path was still long, the trials ahead numerous, but the lesson was clear. Life sometimes puts invisible hippopotamuses in our way, and it is our courage, intelligence, and perseverance that determine whether we overcome them. Clara had just passed through the narrow channel, but the danger was not over. The unpredictable river seemed determined to test her at every meter. Floating trunks suddenly appeared, thrown by the current, and each collision could have broken her fragile canoe. Her arms screamed of fatigue, but her mind refused to falter. She knew rest was a luxury she could not afford. The hippopotamus, still behind her, advanced with unsettling patience. The animal seemed to measure her strength, to observe her, and Clara understood an essential truth. In life, fear is never an enemy to eliminate, but a signal to listen to understand. She slowed her pace, analyzed the waves and the beast's behavior. Every powerful breath of the hippopotamus created ripples that could have overturned the canoe. Clara had to learn to use these waves to her advantage rather than simply endure them. She made a bold decision. Instead of fleeing directly, she made a sudden move to distract the animal. The canoe pivoted slightly, sliding unpredictably on the current. The hippopotamus growled in surprise and gave a violent headbutt, creating a wave that shook the canoe. But Clara, focused like never before, managed to keep her balance. A smile appeared on her lips. Courage was not ignoring danger, but daring to act despite it. As she advanced, she noticed branches hanging over the water, some low, some treacherous, ready to strike anyone not vigilant. Clara understood that survival was not only physical, but mental. Every detail mattered. Observe, anticipate, react. Every gesture was a lesson in concentration and patience. Suddenly, a stronger than expected current pushed her towards a hidden whirlpool behind a cluster of rocks. The canoe was slightly sucked in, threatening to tip over. Clara felt her heart race, but instead of giving in to panic, she took a deep breath and applied a simple yet effective technique, leaning her body towards the current while directing her paddle in the opposite direction. The canoe stabilized. In a few minutes, she had learned what years of fear and hardship had not always taught her. In critical moments, self-control is more powerful than brute force. The hippopotamus, frustrated by her maneuver, let out a long growl and moved in a circular motion, creating new waves. Clara knew this was not the time to dwell on the danger, but to stay in action, with every decision fast and calculated. She recalled her past experiences, all those situations where she had found unexpected solutions to survive. This memory, accumulated through trials, was now becoming a valuable ally. As she navigated between the trunks and eddies, Clara felt fatigue catching up.
Her arms trembled, her legs ached, yet her mind remained clear. Fear no longer dominated. It had become a driving force, a catalyst for vigilance and thought. Every movement, every decision was a subtle balance between caution and audacity. At that precise moment, the river narrowed even more, forming a kind of bottleneck. The hippopotamus approached rapidly, but it no longer had enough space to maneuver as before. Clara saw her opportunity and with total concentration guided her canoe with surgical precision, gliding almost effortlessly through the narrow passage. Adrenaline burned in her veins, and she felt a mix of fear, excitement, and triumph. She then thought of her life. All the times she had believed her limits were reached, all the times she had hesitated, mentally given up before even trying. Today, facing a giant hippopotamus, she understood that true limits are the ones we accept ourselves. And courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to continue despite it. At this moment, a question arises for all who follow her on this adventure. What are your invisible strengths that you can mobilize in critical moments? Fear and danger are not always enemies, but revealers of our hidden abilities. Clara knew that more stages awaited her, each more difficult, but she had just overcome a trial that would remain etched in her memory forever. Every movement, every decision, every breath had brought her closer to her goal. She began to understand that the $1 million was not merely a material reward, it was a symbol of her ability to overcome fear, think quickly, and persevere when all seems lost. And you, reader, witness of this intense struggle, what do you take away from this moment? How would you react if life confronted you with your own hippopotamus, testing your courage and determination? What lessons could you learn about resilience, patience, and self-mastery? Clara continued paddling, her arms aching but her mind clear, advancing cautiously but without hesitation. The hippopotamus still followed, but now she no longer saw it only as a threat. It had become a silent teacher, imparting lessons of strategy, courage, and perseverance to those who know how to watch and listen. Clara felt fatigue in every muscle, but a newfound inner strength kept her upright in the canoe. The colossal, imposing hippopotamus seemed determined not to let her pass. Each wave it created struck the canoe with surprising force, yet Clara remained calm. She had learned to use the current, anticipate the beast's movements, and keep her composure when everything around her seemed chaotic. She reached a calmer section of the river, where the water reflected the sky like a peaceful blue mirror. But she knew the apparent tranquility could be deceptive. A single misstep, a moment of inattention, and the canoe could capsize. Clara took a deep breath, letting her adrenaline settle just enough to remain focused. She recalled all the trials she had endured in her life, all the hardships that had forged her courage and resilience. Every moment of fear had now been transformed into constructive energy. As she advanced, she finally spotted the opposite shore. The golden line of the setting sun illuminated the sandy beach, along with the hope of having survived the most formidable challenge. The hippopotamus, perhaps reluctantly, remained in the water, observing Clara's courage and determination. In this moment, it was no longer just an animal and a human, it was a test of willpower. a face-off between fear and perseverance. Clara made a final effort, pushing her canoe with everything she had left. Her arms trembled, her hands were scraped, but her mind was clear. The shore drew closer, and as she finally set foot on the sand, a feeling of triumph swept over her, mingled with silent respect for the enormous creature that had been both obstacle and teacher. She turned one last time to the river, realizing that every wave, every eddy, every movement of the hippopotamus had been a lesson. Fear had been present, but she had learned not to let it govern her choices. She understood that life often presents challenges that seem insurmountable, but patience, observation, strategy, and courage allow us to overcome them. Clara drew a deep breath, watching the sun set over the river, a serene smile on her face. She knew her journey was not over, but what she had just experienced would remain etched in her forever, as an indestructible proof that courage and perseverance can transform a life. And you, reader, witness of this adventure, what do you take away from this moment? Can you identify your own invisible hippopotamuses, those challenges that seem impossible to face? How could you use fear as a driving force rather than a barrier? And above all, what would you do if you had the chance to turn your obstacles into opportunities, as Clara did? Reflect on these questions, share your thoughts, and tell us what you've learned. Sometimes, the greatest treasures are not money or material reward, but the strength, wisdom, and confidence we discover within ourselves when we dare to face the unknown. Clara drew a deep breath, watching the sun set over the river, a serene smile on her face. She knew her journey was not over, but what she had just experienced would remain etched in her forever, as an indestructible proof that courage and perseverance can transform a life.